A special thank you to each of our subscribers who make this channel possible. Here's today's story. In a striking revelation, the economic claims made by former President Donald Trump regarding his administration's impact on corporate investments in the United States are facing intense scrutiny. Just hours after taking office in January, Trump proclaimed that he had attracted a whopping $3 trillion in new corporate investments. Over time, this figure ballooned to an astonishing $14 trillion, an amount that would account for approximately half of the country's annual gross domestic product. The White House has dubbed this phenomenon the Trump effect, showcasing a list of over 70 projects it attributes to Trump's economic policies, which range from new manufacturing plants to technology facilities across the nation. However, a comprehensive review by Reuters has unveiled a different narrative. As of July 2nd, the White House's own website indicated that only $2.6 trillion of the claimed investments were actually realized, significantly falling short of Trump's grandiose assertions. Alarmingly, the review found that nearly half of the purported spending, totaling more than $1.3 trillion, originated during the presidency of Joe Biden or consisted of routine expenditures that had been rebranded as new investments. In fact, at least 8 of the projects highlighted by the Trump administration had either sought or secured local incentive packages prior to Trump's inauguration. Furthermore, a number of projects had already been publicly announced by local officials or the companies themselves before Trump took office. Notably, 2 initiatives on the list received backing from Biden's legislative efforts aimed at bolstering domestic manufacturing. One significant player in this narrative is Swiss-based Roche, which has cautioned that Trump's plans to equalize U.S. and international drug prices could jeopardize its promised $50 billion investment in the United States. When questioned about the accuracy of their claims, the White House maintained that the final investment decisions were made during Trump's presidency, asserting that this substantiates the argument that his economic policies are indeed driving U.S. investment. White House spokesman Kush Desai was quoted saying, "President Trump is the greatest closer in modern history, and his leadership and policies are a critical catalyst converting hypothetical discussions into firm investment commitments and ground being broken for new plants and offices." Despite the administration's claims, Mark Zandi, chief economist at Moody's Analytics, pointed out that the overall economic forecast for investment has remained relatively unchanged, even in light of the White House's assertions of historic investments. Zandi noted, "I think despite all the announcements, it hasn't translated into any change in expectations. The fundamentals that ultimately drive investment spending appear to have weakened since the start of the year." Zandi further elaborated that Trump's aggressive tariff policies have injected uncertainty into global markets, leading to diminished economic projections and stalled investment decisions. Supporters of Trump, however, argue that his deregulation efforts, combined with the extension of corporate tax cuts, will eventually translate into substantial investments in the near future. Richard Stern, director of economic and budget policy at the Conservative Heritage Foundation, expressed optimism, stating, "I think you're going to see a lot more investment later this year, and certainly into next year." The White House has clarified that the Trump effect list is not exhaustive and does not account for foreign deals purportedly secured during Trump's Middle East tour in May. However, the administration has not provided a detailed breakdown of the claimed $14 trillion in investments. Historically, presidents have been known to exaggerate or embellish economic activity during their tenure, but Trump's background as a businessman has made deal-making a cornerstone of his political identity. He has consistently promised that his presidency would ignite a manufacturing renaissance, bringing jobs back to American soil. Some companies, particularly in the pharmaceutical sector, have rebranded existing spending as new investments under Trump's administration. For instance, Eli Lilly's CEO David Ricks announced a $27 billion investment plan over 5 years, which was celebrated by Trump as evidence of his tariffs' effectiveness. However, this announcement represented only a slight increase over the $23 million the company had already invested in the U.S. since 2020. A closer look at the projects included in the Trump effect list reveals several instances where the investments were either already in motion before Trump took office or were incentivized by local and state governments. For example, Hyundai's $5.8 billion steel plant in Louisiana was announced after a site selection process that began well before Trump's inauguration. Similarly, Corning's $1.5 billion investment in Michigan included funding that had been previously announced and benefited from federal tax credits established under Biden's CHIPS and Science Act. Moreover, the iconic toy manufacturer Lego announced a $366 million distribution center in Virginia. But this project was already in the works with state and local incentives negotiated prior to Trump's presidency. Claussen Quality Chocolate and Yogurt maker Chobani also found their projects on the Trump effect list, despite evidence showing that local incentives had been secured before Trump took office. The scrutiny extends to pharmaceutical giants like Merck and Johnson & Johnson, which announced significant investments that included projects already underway prior to Trump's presidency. These companies did not respond to requests for comment regarding Trump's role in their investment decisions. As the review continues to unfold, it becomes increasingly evident that many of the projects touted by the Trump administration relied heavily on state and local incentive packages that were approved before he assumed office. In a competitive landscape where states vie for corporate investments using enticing incentive packages, the narrative of the Trump effect appears to be more complex than initially portrayed. In conclusion, while the Trump administration has made bold claims regarding corporate investments and economic growth, the reality paints a different picture. As more details emerge, it remains to be seen how these claims will impact the political landscape and public perception of Trump's economic legacy. That's all for this story. We upload videos every day covering many different subjects, so hit that subscribe button to stay informed. Thanks for watching.